Every financial revolution has a closing window, a final moment before the world realizes what it's missed. For XRP, that moment is right now. Most people don't see it yet. They're waiting for headlines, waiting for the crowd to agree, waiting for someone to tell them it's safe. But that's not how real opportunities work. They never announce themselves. They move quietly, behind the scenes, while everyone else sleeps. Welcome back to Crypto Equation, where we look past the noise and uncover the truth about what's really happening in the financial system, and why XRP's window of opportunity is closing faster than most realize. Over the past few years, XRP has gone from being a misunderstood token to the backbone of an emerging global payments infrastructure. It's no longer about speculation, it's about adoption. Ripple has built something the financial world can't ignore: a real-time liquidity network that connects more than 70 countries and thousands of banks, all through one bridge asset. And that bridge is XRP. This isn't theory, it's happening in real time. Every month, Ripple adds new corridors, new partnerships, and new central banks exploring its technology. The noise of retail markets hides it, but behind that noise, the financial plumbing of the world is being rewritten. If you're paying attention, you can feel the pressure building. Because once the global system fully switches to ISO 2022, the Universal Financial Messaging Standard, there's no going back. Ripple built its infrastructure around that standard years ago. Over 10,000 banks now use ISO 2022 for cross-border payments. Ripple didn't have to adapt to the new standard. The new standard adapted to Ripple. That's not luck, that's foresight. And now that the rails are ready, all it takes is one regulatory green light or one institutional shift for everything to move. That's the moment when price stops being emotional and becomes mathematical. The market will have to reprice XRP to reflect the volume it carries. But here's what most people don't understand. This window doesn't stay open forever. Once full adoption begins, you can't enter early. You can't buy the dip when the system reprices to utility. By then, the crowd will already be rushing in, trying to catch something that's already moved. That's why this moment right now, quiet, uncertain, overlooked, is the most important time in XRP's history. The system is aligning while the public looks away. It's the exact setup that precedes every major financial revaluation in history. Let's look at what's actually changed. Ripple's legal clarity is secured. The lawsuit that haunted XRP for years is behind it. That means Ripple can now partner openly with banks, regulators, and payment providers. Their acquisition of Metaco expanded their reach into institutional custody, connecting tokenized assets and digital securities directly into their ecosystem. Central banks are testing Ripple's technology for CBDC interoperability. These aren't rumors. They're documented programs involving real governments and financial institutions. Ripple's not selling dreams. They're deploying infrastructure. And that's why the window is closing. Every new integration makes the system stronger and the opportunity smaller. The people who think they'll buy in later don't understand how exponential adoption works. By the time they see it, it's already too late. Think about the internet. In 1998, you could have bought into companies like Amazon when they were still invisible to the mainstream. But once the world caught up, it was over. The risk was gone, but so was the upside. XRP is sitting in that same 1998 moment right now. Quiet, functional, underappreciated, and one regulatory step away from recognition. That's what makes this window so rare. You don't often get to see a foundational technology before the world prices it correctly. Most investors only realize they missed it when it's already normalized, and that's exactly where this is heading. Because when Ripple's network fully scales, XRP won't be seen as an investment anymore. It'll be infrastructure. At that point, it's not about buying, it's about access. You'll either be part of the system or you won't. The question is, will you realize it before everyone else? The reason most won't is psychological. The human mind is wired to follow crowds, not logic. People wait for validation because validation feels safe, but safety doesn't create wealth. Early understanding does. The same fear that keeps people from acting now will become the regret that defines their future. That's how every major shift plays out. Skepticism first, acceptance later. The irony is that XRP's fundamentals have never been stronger. Its ODL network moves billions in real-world value each quarter. Regulatory clarity is expanding globally. Banks are adopting tokenization frameworks that naturally align with Ripple's ledger. The infrastructure is done. The market just hasn't noticed yet. But when it does, repricing won't be a slow climb. It'll be a recalibration. Liquidity will demand higher value, and markets will adjust instantly. That's how infrastructure assets behave. They don't drift upward, they leap to meet demand. And that leap is what most people aren't ready for. When XRP reprices, it won't feel like a pump. It'll feel like a system catching up to itself. You'll wake up one morning and realize the world no longer debates whether XRP works. It's using it. By that point, the window will be gone. The people who doubted will start explaining why they missed it. The ones who acted will quietly watch, knowing they moved when things didn't look certain. That's how wealth is built, not by waiting for noise, but by understanding silence. The silence we're in right now is temporary. It's the sound before activation, the stillness before movement. Ripple doesn't need to convince the market. It just needs the system to need what it's already built. And that need is growing fast. Global payment rails are inefficient. Central banks are modernizing, and institutions are racing to adapt. Every problem Ripple solves adds another brick to the structure that supports XRP's inevitable role. The question isn't whether the system will use it, it's when. And that when is closer than anyone wants to admit. The window is shrinking by the day. Most people think opportunity looks obvious, but it never does. Obvious is what comes after the breakthrough, when the risk is gone and the story is written. Right now, XRP is still in its misunderstood chapter, and that's exactly where the greatest potential hides. Once the masses understand what Ripple built, the price will already reflect it. What we're living through right now is the final quiet stretch before recognition. The rails are installed, the regulators are aligning, and the financial system is preparing to flip the switch. When that happens, it won't just be a revaluation. It will be a redefinition of how value moves across the planet. Ripple has already proven that on-demand liquidity works. They've reduced settlement times from days to seconds, saved institutions millions in fees, and demonstrated compliance with the toughest global standards. The only reason the market hasn't reacted is because adoption isn't loud. It doesn't trend on Twitter. It happens in contracts, boardrooms, and quiet integrations that take months to finalize. But when enough of those contracts go live, the effect compounds. Liquidity doesn't ask permission, it flows where efficiency exists. And the moment that flow reaches critical mass, XRP becomes indispensable. That's the exact moment when the window slams shut. Look at every previous technological revolution. The first adopters always looked foolish until they didn't. Early internet investors were mocked. Electric car believers were laughed at. And anyone who thought digital assets would reshape banking was called crazy. Then the world caught up, and suddenly those people weren't visionaries anymore. They were simply early. That's the role XRP holders play today. The laughter now is the validation later. The fear today is the reward tomorrow. Because this isn't a guessing game. It's a structural transition already in progress. The International Monetary Fund, the Bank for International Settlements, and the G20 nations have all agreed that cross-border payment reform is essential. Every one of them cites the same goals: speed, transparency, and cost reduction. Ripple's technology meets all three. The infrastructure isn't theoretical. It's tested, regulated, and running. The only question left is scale. And scale, once triggered, grows exponentially. When corridors expand, liquidity compounds. When liquidity compounds, supply tightens. And when supply tightens under real demand, repricing becomes inevitable. That's how markets work. It's not hype, it's math. But here's what makes this moment different. For the first time, retail investors have access before institutions dominate. That access won't last. Once banks and central authorities begin holding XRP for settlement liquidity, regulatory frameworks will tighten. The free market we see today will narrow. This period, the one we're in right now, is the rare overlap between uncertainty and opportunity. That overlap is where fortunes are made. Miss it, and you'll spend the next decade explaining why you waited. The hardest part is patience. Every day that XRP trades sideways, confidence weakens. But sideways action is what institutional accumulation looks like. The market stays flat while volume quietly migrates to stronger hands. That's what's happening now. Smart money doesn't chase spikes. It builds positions during silence. Then, when the trigger event arrives, it already owns the supply. The public will call it a breakout. The insiders will call it Tuesday. Think about what's coming between now and 2030. The rise of CBDCs, tokenized securities, real-time treasury management, and AI-driven finance. Every one of those innovations needs a neutral bridge asset to connect disparate systems. XRP was designed for exactly that role. It's not competing with Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's solving a different problem, the plumbing of global liquidity. Once that plumbing becomes standard, XRP transitions from optional to essential. That's the future being built right now. The irony is that most people holding XRP don't even grasp how close we are. They watch price and miss progress. They think the lawsuit was the finish line when it was only the starting gun. Ripple is scaling faster than ever, acquiring companies, expanding corridors, and partnering with central banks from Bhutan to Brazil. Each new integration shortens the timeline. Each partnership reduces the window. At some point, we'll cross an invisible line where XRP's role is too large to ignore and too entrenched to speculate on. At that moment, it won't be an investment story anymore. It'll be infrastructure. When that happens, the world will reprice not because of emotion, but because of function. Liquidity providers will set floors, not traders. Transaction volume will anchor value. Volatility will shrink, stability will rise, and XRP will evolve from an asset you trade to an asset the system depends on. That's the destiny Ripple has been engineering for over a decade. The biggest mistake investors make is assuming they'll have another chance. They think there will be a clear signal telling them when to act. But real opportunities don't ring bells. They vanish quietly while people wait for confirmation. By the time headlines say XRP finally adopted, the revaluation will already be complete. The window will have closed and the regret will be permanent. So what should you take from this moment? Perspective. Understand that cycles don't repeat, they evolve. The infrastructure phase is almost over. The activation phase is next. Once the first global institutions use RippleNet for continuous settlement, the domino effect begins. Every competitor will follow to stay efficient, and that flood of adoption will rewrite liquidity dynamics overnight. That's when the silence ends, and by then, you either own the bridge or you pay to cross it. This isn't about hype, it's about alignment. The standards are active, the technology is proven, and the need is universal. The only thing missing is recognition. And recognition always arrives suddenly. Don't sleep on this moment, because in a few years, people will look back and say, that was the time to move. And the only question that will matter is whether you did. The clock is ticking, the rails are ready, and the world's financial system is evolving faster than anyone predicted. XRP's window is almost closed. Don't wait for permission to see it. Understand it now, while it's still early enough to matter. This is Crypto Equation, reminding you that in every transformation, there's a moment when belief separates from noise. Those who recognize it early don't chase wealth. They meet it halfway. Stay informed, stay patient, and never underestimate what's being built in silence. I'll see you in the next one.